Hey guys, welcome back. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the loading states in Livewire. So let's get started. First of all, what are loading states? Loading states are a set of functionality in Livewire that allows us to display an element, hide an element, or perform UI tasks on our component when a request is in progress. So by a request in progress, I mean, for example, when we click on this create or we upload an image, there is an AJAX request in the background, right? So that might take maybe half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds. So that's what I mean by loading state. So we can show something while that request is in progress. So let's take a look at an example so we can see this clearly. So I'm going to go ahead on our component, and this is the exact same component from the previous episode. So I'm going to go ahead and add an sleep for like 2 seconds to it, right? So on a regular application, maybe you have this registration form and one of your users has a very slow connection. Maybe they're on a mobile phone and they click on this create, and that took like 2 seconds, right? And sometimes it might even take longer. Maybe it took 5 seconds. I don't know. So usually that's not a really good user experience. So your user might think your application is broken. They might give up or they might be frustrated. And it's just not a good look. So what you can do, for example, is show some sort of spinning wheel or progress bar. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So I'm going to go open up our HTML, and this is basically our submit button. So in order to show a progress bar or some sort of a loading state, you can go ahead and first create it. So I'm going to go ahead and create some HTML, and I'm going to say sending. And by default, obviously, it's going to be showing all the time. So what I can do is give it an attribute of wire loading. And we kind of did this on the previous episode, but we can add wire loading. And what this tells Livewire to do is only show this when we are performing a request in the background. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to reload the page, click on create, and as you can see, this sending only showed when we were submitting a request in the background, which is very nice. Okay. Now you can also give it some timing delays. So for example, you could say loading.delay, and what this does is it only shows it if the request takes longer than 200 milliseconds. So I personally usually only use wire loading.delay. Okay, so let's go ahead and try again. Obviously right now it is showing, but if I were to remove the sleep and click on it, we are no longer actually seeing the send because the request is very fast, right? So if wire.delay would only show it if it takes longer than 200 milliseconds, right? So if I remove this and we try again, I don't know if you guys can tell, it's very quickly that's send is coming and it comes and goes, okay? So usually that looks very weird to the users if they have a fast internet connection. So you want to do wire.delay. Now there are some other versions of this. So there is also wire.delay.long, and I believe this is minimum of 300 milliseconds, and there is longer and longest. But if you guys want to check this out, you can actually go to the Livewire documentation, click on documentation, and on the left bar, select loading states and scroll all the way down, and these are all the available options. So we have delay, delay.long, longer, and longest. And there's also short, shorter, and shortest. I have probably never used this, even in Livewire 2. I don't think I have ever even tried to use this, but wire.loading.delay, I have used it in Livewire 2 a lot. Okay, so that's personally what I use majority of the time, but it depends on your application. Okay, maybe you want to show a different loading bar depending if it takes longer than 1 second or something like that. So it's up to you guys, but you're free to use any of these depending on your use case. Okay, so one more thing you can do is you can also hide an element when you're submitting it. So for example, I might want to remove this button when I'm submitting my form. So I'm going to go ahead and bring back the sleep, and I want to hide this button when I'm submitting my form. So I can go ahead and say wire loading.remove, and as its name suggests, it will remove the element when we are loading. So let's take a look, and boom, the button is gone, guys, as you can see. So this is quite useful as well. Sometimes you may want to do that. Now, one more thing you can do, guys, is you can also add an attribute to an element when you're loading. So this is done using wire loading.attr for attribute. And the most common example of this is, for example, you can disable your buttons when you're submitting. So I can say disabled, and this will go ahead and disable the button when we are submitting. So the user won't go ahead and like spam click it. Now by default, if you have your button inside a form element, I believe HTML5 actually disables your buttons automatically, okay? But you won't always have it inside a form. Sometimes you don't have your buttons inside a form. So it's important to have wireloading.attr, because if the request takes a long time, maybe it takes like 5 seconds for a user on a slow connection, they might like spam that button like 10 times. And that has happened actually to me on real applications. So that is something you want to do. And as you can see now, the button is obviously disabled, which is very nice. Now, one more thing you guys can do as well is add a class to an element when you're loading and remove a class. So to add a class to an element, you can say wire loading.class. And maybe you want to change the background color of your button when you're submitting. So I can say bg, the default is bg.teal. I can maybe make it blue. And let's see how this looks in practice. I click on the button, and as you can see, it became blue. And after the request is done, it will go back to its original classes. You also have the opposite of this. You can say wire class.remove, and obviously this will go ahead and remove something. Maybe I want to remove text white. Let's test this out, and as you can see, the button turned black. So these are quite useful as well, depending on your use case. You may want to hide an element, add a class, remove a class. You can do both of those things, guys. So these are the most commonly used loading state features. One more thing you could do is target a specific element. And what I mean by that is only, for example, show the sending when a specific property on your component is being updated. So we actually did this on the previous episode. We had wire target image. And what this wire target does is it tells Livewire to show this uploading only when we are performing an action related to our image, right? In our case, it was whenever I was uploading an image, it will, it went ahead and showed uploading. So you can also use wire target. Now, wire target also works with actions. So for example, here I can say wire target create. And what this does is whenever I create, basically when I'm submitting the action create, it will go ahead and show it. So as you can see, we have this create here. So if I had another function, public function update, using that wire target create, it will only show when we are submitting the create action. Okay, if we, for example, clicked on a button for updating, it won't show it. So you can also use wire target. It's a bit more niche, depending for like, it has a smaller use case, but it's also useful for some of you depending on your application. And I think that is it, guys, for today. Loading states are very useful, but they're also very simple. By default, for me personally, I only show a spinning wheel when I'm submitting my forms or I'm doing something, and I always add wireloading.attr disabled on my buttons if they are not inside a form. That's the most commonly used basically functionality in my personal experience. But again, you may need any of these depending on your application. So that is it, guys, for today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified of the latest Livewire videos. That is all for today, guys. I see you on the next episode. Bye.